Intelligent Dairy Solutions North America, part of Peacock Group, is honored and proud to support this first ever video of the Millennial Ag podcast. The alignment of values between Millennial Ag and Intelligent Dairy Solutions North America fosters this opportunity to support this pivotal milestone for Millennial Ag in its 200th episode. Common to our values are addressing the immediate labor challenges, the medium-term, market-led challenges of policy, economics, and consumer perception, which we believe can be addressed by precision management, and in the long term, driving new ways of thinking around the future of North American agriculture. Welcome to Millennial Ag's 200th episode.
Welcome to Millennial Ag. Yes, you guys are still tuning in to the right show today. Don't worry. My name is Jessie Jarvis, and I have the opportunity to put the ladies behind your favorite show, Millennial Ag, in the hot seat today in honor of their 200th episode. That is a really big milestone when it comes to the world of podcasting. These ladies, as you probably know, have been doing the show for right around, I think it's 6 years now. Is that correct, ladies?
Yep, we'll be 6 years old in August.
In the podcast world, that is a long time, especially considering that the majority of podcasts don't make it past 10 episodes. Isn't that kind of an interesting fact? It's like 70% of podcasts don't make it past 10 episodes, let alone to 200 episodes. And today I have the honor of really getting to moderate a discussion. You know, it's not going to be some like, let's walk back through this timeline and talk about our journey as podcasters and, pick apart favorite pieces of shows. And we're going in on some really big topics for our industry, which is going to impact anybody in agriculture. It doesn't matter what sector of the industry you're from. So I'm really excited about this, and I feel very honored that these ladies chose me. Do you guys have anything to add before we get right into the questions?
Just a huge thank you, Jessie, for helping us, rework the format of our episode this time around. And it's kind of fun to be on this side of things. So thank you for moderating us, and thank you for that incredible introduction.
Yeah, it's an honor, Jessie, to have you on, and it's an honor to have you as a friend too. So thank you for taking our wild idea and flying with it.
Well, of course. I know before we started recording, we were talking about how I had been a guest on the show before, but Katharine was out at the time having a baby. So it was just me and Valene. So this kind of feels like I get to be here with you guys all over again. I love this.
Yeah, we're excited. We love having repeat guests, and it is very nice to meet you this time around. Last time was a little bit busy for me, so good that life has calmed down in that regard.
Okay, so before the show, we had talked about what you guys wanted to talk about today. And as I mentioned, this isn't some recap. We are getting into some really crucial topics for our industry. And the very near future is really presenting a lot of change and uncertainty for all industries, I would say, but especially agriculture. And today's episode is really going to focus on the opportunities of AI. That is artificial intelligence, you guys, not the other kind of AI that many of us are in the industry are used to. And what's happening in the political world with tariffs and labor and trade. And so these are two very heavy hitting topics, and we're going to get right into them. So, you know, agriculture really has always been at the forefront of major, I would say, economic and technological shifts, whether it is, when automation came along. Now, think about it. I mean, GPS and tractors and silencer chutes or any kind of hydraulic chute. Like, I think of the revolution that we have had in that side of things, which I think is really fascinating. And then obviously we have a new president. And so the political and economic shift under President Trump and, kind of what changes we're seeing there. So we're going to get into AI first. AI and agriculture. What are your guys' instant thoughts when I say AI and agriculture? And again, this is artificial intelligence, not insemination.
Lot better at it than I was a year ago. I work for a tech company in the livestock sector, and our main focus is AI. When I first started with the company, it was a little bit different technology that we were using, but our focus now is AI. And it took me some time to get past the AI versus AI, because I grew up on a dairy and I grew up breeding cows and all of that sort of thing. And so it's definitely had to be a perspective shift for me. But now it's part of our parlance, right? It's common everyday wording that we use across our conversations, whether we're talking in ag, whether we're talking, my husband and I are saying, hey, what's chat GPT saying about this, just to try different things out. We're talking about using AI in educational systems, to write scripts, all of the sorts of things. And so the way that AI has kind of wormed its way into our mainstream consciousness and our culture and our society and our industries, um, and how fast it's done, I think for me, it really became apparent with the rise of ChatGPT, a year and a half ago, Christmas, almost 2 years ago. Um, and the way that it's sort of exploded on the scene and become apparent, all of its uses and all of its opportunities it's been very eye-opening for me.
I would say it's almost overwhelming. You start diving into what AI can do in general and how much data is out there. And it's very overwhelming, but it's very encouraging too. And I think we also have to make sure that it's fed the correct information too, and we're still we're using it to process data rather than tell us the answer all the time, and making sure that we are still checking it, because there are people outside of agriculture that are developing these programs that we are using, and they don't always know what we are up to on a day-to-day basis, or what the cows even think or do.
Oh, absolutely. I would say too, thinking about like ChatGPT is not Google, right? And so I've often wondered because we'll use it for of the West. And so I was actually pleasantly surprised at some of the questions that I've asked it specifically about agriculture, and it gives me really accurate answers. But then I wonder, is that because of what I'm feeding it? So it knows my like where I'm coming from versus because I know that if I give ChatGPT a prompt and Catherine gives the same prompt to her ChatGPT and Valene gives the same prompt to her ChatGPT, we are all going to get different answers because it is built to us and the information that we've fed it and how we've used it in our voice, which I think is great. But at the same time, is it going to give us all of the same answers? Like if you ask it a question and I ask it a question and Catherine asks it a question, are we all getting the same answer back?
Well, and that brings in the question too of, it learns your voice, it learns the way that you think, and honestly, kind of the answers that you're looking for. And that brings us back to algorithms, on social media or even in Google, search engines or whatever, that have learned your tendencies, and wants to give you the information that you're looking for. And is the information you're looking for that you want to confirm your bias, is it necessarily the truth? Right. So I think that that's always an interesting question to bring up when we talk about chatbots in particular, and even just Googling, on Google, it comes up with the AI thing now before you get to any of the answers. And then the answers are all sponsored, right? Like you have to really go digging to find real information these days. And as human beings, we go towards what's easy, right? And look, oh, there's an answer, it seems good enough, let's roll with it. And that, I think, that's one part of the AI revolution that we're seeing. And on that side, it concerns me in terms of what consumers or outside stakeholders or policymakers or whoever might be looking for, when they're looking for information on agriculture. Are they getting the true, real, fact checked, industry standard information, or are they getting what their algorithm wants to show them? And then on the other side of AI, I think about what tools AI is creating, not just a chatbot, not just answers off of the internet, but what tools is it creating to make our lives easier, particularly in agriculture. And so I think of things like, thinking about vision assisted precision management on a livestock operation. And this is the space that I work in right now. But we have developed algorithms with artificial intelligence to be able to say, hey, look at this cow. We're seeing this shape change in her body. We're watching her limp. We're seeing that, she is lying down more than a normal cow should be. She hasn't come up to the feed bunk as often. And so the camera can see that. Then the camera gets told by the algorithm, that's not right. And so then it sends an alert to the farmer. And I think that that kind of a tool that is created by AI and assisted by AI presents a lot of really, really cool opportunities for the industry. That's how I view AI in two different buckets. But Val, what do you think about the the information put out there versus the tools that are being presented?
the information put out there is the stuff that we really have to protect too, like making sure it represents what we want it to represent, because we can take snippets of data and paint whatever picture. I know working specifically in the environmental activist realm, unfortunately, way too often is they'll take snippets of data and push it, you know, make a snippet of it to make somebody look like a bad operator when in reality it's not true. And so making sure that we're not losing all the data and we're we're painting a true picture, I think, is really important. But one thing I've noticed over the last 5 years since being in the ag engineering world is everybody keeps telling me, we've got all this data, we don't know how to process it. We've got all this data, we don't know how to process it. Specifically in the dairy world, I think the beef industry is getting there too, with the electronic identification tags and so forth, in the feedlots, um, and all the research they're doing there. But we have so many data points, and so AI allows us to utilize really smart people to write programs that can actually process the data and use it to transfer into something that's useful. Because if you have all these little sensors on on your milking parlor but don't know what to do with the data, what use is that data, and why are we paying for the robots, and why are we paying for all these sensors if I don't even know what the data means? So I think being able to actually process the data in whatever realm we're in. Same with feed yards. We're getting daily gains. We're getting temperatures. We're getting marbling. All the data. Are we actually tracking it and giving it back to the producer? How are we managing that data? And I think AI specifically can help a lot with that. It's just making sure that it's being coded and set up correctly to provide the data that's relevant to the person that's receiving that data.
I love that you guys brought that up too, because I think, going back to Catherine, what you had mentioned about ChatGPT came out about 2 years ago. ChatGPT was not first. We have been using AI in all industries, even in agriculture, for years leading up to the rise of ChatGPT. But that was what made people aware. Oh, this is AI. And now I'm afraid of it or I don't like it, when in reality, I guess I maybe just didn't realize that I've been using AI for the last years, just because of what you guys said about different algorithms and technology and how we process and sort data. And so I do think that as far as agriculture is concerned, there is a lot of opportunity in the future to really streamline what it is that we do, especially because we can give it the parameters we want. Like, it is not AI coming in and getting in the driver's seat. It is us telling it what we want it to do for us. It's not the other way around. But I think that people are afraid that it is getting in the driver's seat like a car without a driver and taking us wherever the heck it wants to. And that's not the case.
The whole conversation of driverless cars, but we'll leave that for another day, right? Rise of the robots. You brought up a couple points there, Jessie, that just it sparked a thought. First, I want to say though is that you're absolutely right about it's putting us in the driver's seat, and I think and having it come along as support or as a partner. We're still driving the narrative, we're still driving production practices and management decisions and all that sort of stuff. But I think where AI comes in, can really be part of the labor conversation as well, right? We've talked on Millennial Ag so many times about the labor issues that we have in agriculture and across our country, in the service industries and the trades industries and all that sort of stuff. We all know that stuff, and we'll get to the labor conversation in a minute. But AI can assist us with, making those smaller decisions or doing some of that smaller AI and automation. I'm thinking about robots here too. Can assist us with those tasks that maybe are a little more mindless or a little bit lower skilled, and can allow the people who have been physically doing those tasks to kind of level up in their everyday work. Whether it's going from milking cows every single day to becoming a feeder, and really using that specialized skill to develop a ration for cows, or, moving up into management, working with people versus, just working on a parlor, all those sorts of things. are just, thoughts that I've just had about how AI can help address another really critical issue in agriculture. I I do come back to what Val was saying though about all of the data that we gather, and we've talked about that a whole bunch too. And I have those conversations with dairymen every single day. Just last week, I was in California, and there is a dairyman who milks 5,000 cows, runs a really tight, really great operation, third generation. And he said it's 2025, and I have more information than I ever have, and I use less information than I ever have because I don't know what to do with it. And so I think it comes back to what Val is saying and being able to not just gather the data, not just collate the data, not just make a report out of the data, but be able to turn it into actionable items that a producer can use to make management decisions and create efficiencies and gains and, all the things that go along with that. So that leads me into the next conversation about data in AI. We gather all this data, it's proprietary to your operation. My question is, who owns the data? And the three of us have an answer to that, right? And I think every producer, if they think about it, knows the answer to that. It's the producer. But we haven't always been in the driver's seat, to use your language, Jessie, in that regard.
Oh, absolutely. Valene, what do you think about that?
I think that's the most concerning thing for me is, and I think most producers, right? Like you think of rural America and we're for the most part remote. We don't want other people in our business. We want to we'll share what we want to share, but we want to keep our some of our secrets our secrets. And it's a good and a bad thing. But it's also concerning because somebody can take that data and take a snippet of it and skew it against us too. And I think that's my biggest fear. And talking with some of my team here at Ag Pro was okay. So if you enter, gobs of data, for example, in Chat GPT, what level of Chat GPT do you have to purchase so that that data is yours and they're not taking the data and using it in the algorithms for somebody else when they pull it? Are you feeding the system? Are you creating your own data set? And I think being cognizant of that, because I would say over the last few years, animal activism has and agriculture activism too. Agriculture is under more scrutiny than it ever has. Whether you talk about environmental issues, GMOs, sage grouse, you name the topics. It's under a microscope because we have all this data, and you can find whatever data you want. You can find data that cows grazing with sage grouse is good. You can find data that says that sage grouse are and cows can't coexist. You can paint whatever picture you really want to based off of Googling your biased. And so I think it's making sure that we are truly, truly checking ourselves at the door and saying, okay, I have all this data. What does it truly tell me about the operation? And I have to check myself too as a professional. um, I have to make sure that I'm using all the data to advise my clients on what to do, not just what's cheapest, easiest, and will get them to tomorrow. What'll get them 5, 10 years down the road? What'll get the environment 5, 10 years down the road? What'll get cows down the road 5, 10 years? Like we've got to have bigger conversations and authentically use the data, and make sure we're getting the original source, because things will be tweaked and quoted and sourced 10 times before it ever gets to us. And so making sure we're going clear back to the beginning and getting the raw authentic data that paints the entire picture of what's actually going on with the data.
I think those are really important pieces to consider. This is a little bit different, but I just got an email this morning. I think it was from Marketing Brew, maybe, about how over the weekend 23andMe filed for bankruptcy. And so now people are really worried about the DNA data that this company, if they are sold to another company, is your DNA going to be sold with it? And it actually recommended that you go into your account and delete your information, just so that way, if if 23andMe is sold to another party, that then your data isn't sold with it, which is just a really, obviously that is not related to agriculture and AI, but it is a very real example of information and proprietary information. And is it yours, is it mine, is it the chat gpt's, and what that looks like. The other thing too that I think that Valene, you had brought up, is this idea that you can go find your bias anywhere. And I am a big believer in science, like facts, right? It's really hard to refute the facts. And we often hear, well, you have to follow the science, or science doesn't lie. But again, we have seen that there is science that supports what is over here, and there's also science that supports what's over on the opposite side. And so it is now just getting more and more difficult to, and I think about that again outside of agriculture, more on the health space, right? Like we have obviously a lot is going on with this Make America Healthy movement and whatnot. And so, we have people who are very like healthcare oriented saying no vaccines and this, and we have the science to support it. And then there are people on the other side who say no, we have the science to support that it has caused whatever issues it has. And that is maybe a terrible example, but I'm saying like both sides say we have science. So again, where are we finding that information, or are we doing our due diligence in not only looking to the science that is maybe supporting our bias?
I mean, that's another really great point to bring up, Jesse, as far as, well, just as far as the bias conversation goes, because you can, I mean, you can find scientific papers with real scientists and the letters behind their names, and it's a, double blind peer reviewed study, that, you know, some of us might look at and say that is absolutely bonkers, that makes absolutely no sense. And we all know how you can tweak data and massage the data and, have small sample sizes and, get to the outcome that you want when you're doing a scientific experiment. um, but it's another very real concern that we have across life, as you say, but especially in agriculture, when you know when we're operating under social license that may or may not give us permission to to make management decisions that we need to based on the science that we know works. But they might not like vaccines in cattle, or they might not like GMOs in crops, and we know why the business case is there for that. We know the economics, we know the stewardship of the land that those sorts of technologies can support. Someone else finds something on Google, or they've got a different agenda than we do, and they can push policy and stakeholder support and all that sort of thing to make it so that we can operate the way that is best for us, for our land, and for our animals. So I think that's a really, really interesting point. And coming back to the data again, and when it comes to somebody else using our data in a way that might not benefit us, is I come to the monetization of data, right? We own all of this data. And I think, take agriculture out of it, but we sign up for these apps, we sign up for these emails, we say, yes, I agree to these terms and conditions. And I don't think that we as a society have understood what we're signing away, because the biggest moneymaker these days is data. It's all of our personal data. And okay, so maybe your personal health records, like it says Catherine Lott's speech, suffers from XYZ or whatever. A data cruncher company or a data scraper is not getting that it's Catherine, but they're getting that this is where this person lives, this is her age range, this is something that she's dealing with health wise. They're monetizing that, and that's I gave away permission to do that, and I didn't even think about it because I wanted the service that the app or whatever was providing. And so coming back to agriculture, and something else that I do in my day-to-day work is trying to figure out how to make that data not just work as far as a management decision for today or tomorrow, but into the future. There's all these other companies that want the carbon credits that a livestock operation is producing. They want, they want measurements showing that an operation is more sustainable than another. And they want to capitalize on that. They want to be able to sell that story to another company who has promised stakeholders and consumers and investors that this is what we're doing by 2035. And they're making money off of the work that a producer has done, and the producer isn't getting anything on the back end. So along the lines of who owns this data is who is making money off of this data. And as far as who owns it, it's the producer. And as far as who should make money off of it and the most money off of it, in my opinion, should be the producer.
Valene, what are your thoughts? Because we were talking about bias, and I do want to get to the next topic, which is politics. There's a whole lot of bias there. Do you have any final thoughts, though, on AI before we move over to this new president and the economic shift that we're seeing?
Well, and I think we need to lean into technology. We need to lean into it cautiously, but I think we need to be okay leaning into it and not be willing to take that next step, but also, like Catherine said, questioning who owns the data, how I can keep my data, and if you're gonna sell the data, which I don't think is always bad because we need to do research, we need to know the what's going on and knowing that white females that are 33 years old suffer from, have a tendency to suffer from whatever, might be something that can help us in the future. But um, knowing that who it belongs to and making sure that we're at the table having the conversation, which I think can lead into the next topic quite well, is making sure agriculture is at the table with these conversations and we're not burying our heads in the sand with this and blindly walking into it. We're having the conversations, or we're putting people in place to have the conversations for us that we trust.
Well, that is the perfect way to segue into the next conversation. Does agriculture have a seat at the table when it comes to just the economic shift that we're seeing right now? And right, good, bad, indifferent. I think that there are a lot of people who are unsure, frankly, right? Because there are a lot of changes happening all at once. And, when we, especially in agriculture, know that if we want to make a change within our herd, we can't do too much all at one time because then it's really hard for us to go back and know, okay, was it this that I did? Was it this that I did? Was it, this other thing that I did that is why I saw that change? Is it maybe all four of them together? But that's why in a study, right, you have to really add in one thing and then see how that works and then add in another. That is not necessarily the case of what is happening right now in the politics. It is like I kind of feel like you're in a wind tunnel and you're dodging all of this stuff of, you know, so anyways, first question that I'll just ask you guys, do you think that agriculture has a seat at the table or is a focus when it comes to this administration and the economic changes that they're making?
I'm going to jump in and optimistically say yes. I think agriculture is at the table, and I know through some of his addresses and stuff, he does mention farmers. Whether he understands what's actually going on the ground and what the actual impacts are is a whole nother question. But I think agriculture, food security, price of food is is on the top of mind. I know avian influenza's constantly coming across the president's desk. I know that those hot topics are definitely there. So I think ag has a seat at the table. But my question is, how much do we actually know what's going on, and how much is lip service, and how much is, going back to our data conversation, is twisted to the bias that I'm receiving in my inbox? And so I think continuing to pay my dues to organizations that can do some of the brain damage back in DC is more important than ever right now. It's holding those people accountable, but it's sending people like Tanner Beamer to Congress to talk to him because I don't have the bandwidth or the power to want to do that. And so it's calling people like that and saying, "Hey, this is what's actually going on here in Idaho. How can you help me back in DC?" And I think it's more important than ever that ag's talking about this and talking through this, because it, like, you talk about your wind tunnel and it's like, okay, let's see what actually sticks to the side of the wind tunnel, and we're blown through because you look at the tariffs over the last month, and we're putting 25% tariffs on Canada and Mexico. Oh, wait, I'm pulling them back. Oh, wait, we're going 15%. And I'm just making all these numbers up because I don't even know where we sit right now, to be honest. But I think I think because why they've been pulled back is because of agriculture. And people have said, I don't want to pay more for my products. And ag is national security. Do I think the approach is right? Probably not. But again, I'm not at that table. I'm hoping that other people are there for ag, and that we are getting our voice heard. But I'm optimistic that ag's at the table. I just hope that all of ag is at the table and not just a few industries.
I think You bring up so many good points there, Val, and as very often happens between us, I agree with a lot of them. And I like your phrasing and Jesse's phrasing of "Are we at the table?" Because I remember, when I first became aware of animal activism and was getting involved in 4-H and FFA and speeches and all that sort of stuff, there was a phrase going around the industry that said, "If you're not at the table, you're on the menu." And I think that I think that's always true for agriculture or for any industry that's interested in promoting and protecting themselves, but agriculture in particular, because we are such a small segment of society and of the population. And a lot of the work that we do is in the background and under the radar because we're so used to having 3 square meals a day. And it's no big deal because you go to the grocery store and there's food there, right? We've never, in our generation, and probably since about the end of World War II, we haven't really been hungry as a country. And so it's just one of those things that just rolls in the background, right? It's the operating system that just works, right? And I think that it's a really good thing on one hand, and on the other hand, because it helps our society and culture move along really smoothly. But on the other hand, it presents challenges that you were just talking about in making sure that not only do we have a seat at the table, but we have the right voices at the table. And it sort of comes back to that bias thing that you were talking about, Jesse, right? Do we have the right people who are looking out for the majority of agriculture interests and not just being the squeaky wheels and the really loud voices about what their own personal agenda might be? And I think, the things that Val talked about in terms of being able to address that and sending the Tanners to Congress. And how many shout outs do we give to Tanner on this show? Because to start charging royalties, but he is that good, right? He does do that work super super well. It's what he's immersed himself in, and he very much has our best interests at heart. And I think that we need to make sure that we send those people to DC, make sure that we elect those people, and make sure that agriculture, as a whole, understands how important that is. Now, going back to, is what the new administration doing good or bad or indifferent? I don't think anybody in their right mind would say that it's indifferent, right? Not at this point in time. And as always, there's not one straight answer. Not all of it is good, not all of it is bad. I do wonder, though, like Val said, do they understand, the people making these decisions, do they understand the deeper nuances and consequences beyond what they are generating for headlines? Because as we all know, this administration likes to make a lot of noise in the news, right? No news is bad news for them, right? and and I do wonder, I mean, this is personal for me. And don't want to hang ourselves too far out there with our personal political views, but when Trump was announcing the tariffs against New Mexico or Mexico and Canada the first time, maybe, he tweeted out or put on Truth Social, we're having these tariffs, it's going to make a whole life a whole bunch better for farmers, have fun. And to me, that felt really really tone deaf, in terms of, you're creating new tariffs, new taxes, and inflation on farmers and on consumers. And it sounded really flippant to me, go have fun, this this policy that I'm chucking out there. And who's to say? I don't know. I genuinely don't know if tariffs are going to end up being a good thing, net positive, net negative, for agriculture, for consumers. I don't know.
I think that that's exactly how many of us feel. I keep trying to think because, again, I feel like wind tunnel, all of this stuff is happening so fast. And like, is it good? Is it bad? It takes me back to, and I use this analogy a lot, of like cleaning up the pantry. You open up the pantry, it is insanely messy. You think, okay, I have to clean it. You pull everything out of the pantry, you put it all on the counter. You stop, you go to the bathroom, you come back, you walk into the kitchen, and you think, oh my gosh, what have I done? This mess is even bigger than the mess that I started with, which was behind closed doors, which was the messy pantry. And if you walk away and leave it there, then yeah, you are absolutely going to have a mess on your hands. But then as you put the things back where they need to go, and you organize and throw out what doesn't fit anymore or what, is expired, and then you can close the pantry door. And the next time you open it, you think, oh my gosh, this is so organized. It is so clean. You had to make it what was a mess. You had to make it messier in order to get to the place where it was good and organized so that it could be useful. And that is me personally kind of what I'm trying to be optimistic in is like, are we in this phase of cleaning out the pantry where it has to get a little bit worse before it gets better?
I think that's a very optimistic way to look at it, and that's what I've had to try to remind myself of over and over again because I've had to remove a lot of national politics and even state politics from my radar right now. You know, it comes up in conversation all the time, and I have my opinions and try to keep general tabs on where things are going. But it's so emotionally charged. And back to our data conversation, I don't know what's true and not true anymore either. What's coming across the headlines, and I find people on the far left are extremely outraged and hate everything that ever comes out of the administration right now, and people on the far right are bowing down and worshiping everything that goes. And there's somewhere in the middle that's accurate, right? Like it's never completely polarized, but I think reminding ourselves that we we have to continue to show up day to day and do what's best for us personally, what's best for our operations, and what's best for our families is key because it's really charged. And I struggle with the thing that I struggle most with right now is that there's not a middle ground. You're either one way or the other right now. And so I'm hoping that with this messiness right now, that somewhere on the other side we can come to middle ground rather than flipping the pendulum completely the other way in the next administration, and trying to make it so that when we open the pantry door, we can find the Department of Ag and know where avian influenza and who's actually responding to it is located and not, "Oh, I think USDA is gonna respond to this," or, "I hope that the vaccine bank's up to date if foot and mouth shows up," like, we can actually go and find where that information is, and I'm hoping that the clean out, is that because I mean, anybody can talk about the state of the BLM office and so forth, and it's a mess, and there is multiple government agencies that are just messes, and they have been for decades. So cleaning them out's not a bad thing, but it's for me, it's the approach and reminding. For me, it's about humanization too, and I think sometimes we're taking that humanization out. That there's a heartbeat behind the layoffs. There is, actual people that are affected by this, and just showing a little bit of compassion. You can still layoffs aren't always a bad thing, but show a little bit of compassion rather than whipping those people around by laying off, putting them on probation, paying them for not coming to work, doing this, doing like, let's just be clear and kind and come back to humanization in the process of cleaning out the pantries is, I guess, my biggest frustration aside from the actual policies or politics behind it.
No, I think that absolutely we're all on the same page there. And I'm curious what your listeners, what their personal thoughts are. Isn't this is always in the time when I wish that there was like a hotline somebody could call or something like that's always the worst. But one thing that I think that is crucial is how are tariffs going to affect agriculture? Tariffs can be good or inflation can be good. I can say in the sense that higher food prices can be great for ag, right? Because it raises our price, but at the same time, then everything else rises as well. So all of those input costs. So it's net, right? Whether it was 5 cents in a dollar or $5 and $100, like it is all relative. What do you think are some strategies that producers can use to really like hedge that risk and protect their margins in an environment that is just so volatile right now?
Oh man.
If I could answer that question, I'd be a millionaire right now.
Right, right, right. Yeah, that's for dang sure. I That's such an interesting question, Jesse, and I love that coming into the conversation beyond just we're hearing this percentage of tariffs or we're hearing this percentage of inflation. we keep hearing the numbers. They change every day, like Val says, both what's going to be put upon other countries in terms of tariffs and what the numbers are doing inside the country. Like, 30% inflation today and it's 42% tomorrow. And when I go to the grocery store, I choke because there is no reason that a loaf of bread should cost $6. And if I had more time in my life, I would just make my own bread on the regular. But that's, again, a whole nother conversation. But as far as what agriculture can do to kind of hedge these challenges that we're seeing, and disclaimer here, listeners, we are not a consulting agency. We do not provide advice. This is just things that we are thinking about ourselves. So if you go and do something based on what we say, we bear no responsibility. One thing that I think is coming back to utilizing AI, automation, all of those sorts of things to hedge your bets or to hedge your costs against labor. Using those tools to be able to increase efficiencies, and they're getting towards being priced at a point where they outperform and cost less than human labor. In California, you're paying nearly $30 an hour. $30 an hour to milk cows. Okay, that is comparable to my salary. All right, and I know that the costs of living are very different in California, and gas is $5 a gallon and all of that sort of stuff. But if you have three guys in a parlor just attaching machines to a cow, three guys in a parlor 3 times a day, 24/7, 365, that cost in California is nearly $250,000. Okay, and you can put in a robotic or you can put in a robot to do those same tasks, and the cost over 5 years is $250,000. So you think about those cost efficiencies, right? And if you look at it based against tariffs and inflation in particular, essentially you're forward contracting your labor. You have a known cost for the next 5 years, right? Who knows what's going to happen to the minimum wage and cost of living and inflation in California over the next 5 years. So that's something that I think of when we come to trying to risk manage what inflation, what tariffs, what new policies are coming out of a new administration, if that makes sense to anyone.
What absolutely does, in just kind of thinking ahead of what are the things that I can invest in now that I know are going to be more of a fixed cost, so that as over time, as whatever volatility happens, I am going to kind of like be put in my bubble wrap in that sense. Valene, what are your thoughts?
Well, and I think controlling what we can control and um, being fluid with what we cannot control, I think is a great reminder in this, because most um, commodities and so forth we're price takers, we're not price makers. And so we can't control the price. We can do things like forward contract, we can hedge, we can do risk, buy LRP. We can do a bunch of these little tools to help to protect ourselves with high cost right now, to get the most cost for our calf. But at the end of the day, we're still price takers. And so that can change overnight. And so it's reminding ourselves what can we control. Um, and I think one thing I have to remind myself of too is my attitude is one thing I can control too. And it's easier said than done, but we can control um when we feed our cows. We can control when we turn them out. We can control how often we check. We can control um who checks them, things like that. We can try to prevent some of the diseases. We can control our biosecurity measures, but there's things we can't control. We can't control that avian influenza is now in cattle. We can't control it through in sh- and now in sheep, and cats are the first ones to kind of catch it and die from it. Like, we can't control those things. And so I think, getting up every day and trying to just do our routines and do what we can control, and be okay having a bad day too. I know this is, being okay wrestling with all this stuff, and then reminding ourselves, what can I control, what's out of my control, and and working that way. And I think the biggest thing that uh, I would say my dad has instilled in me, and that my husband and I try really hard to do, is put pencil to paper too, as often as we can, on where things are at financially too. Because if you're not projecting, or you don't know, like, input costs change on the daily. We don't know that the tractor repair that's going to come, unfortunately, and we don't know that seed costs could go up or down tomorrow. But if we can keep putting pencil to paper and know where our risk threshold is financially, and know where our risk threshold is, with death loss and so forth like that, then those are the targets we can keep pushing towards, to try to minimize the risk. Because I can't control what Trump's going to do on tariffs. I can't control whether the Chinese beef market's going to stay open in the next year. I can't control whether market or Mexico feeder cattle are gonna start coming across the border again. Like, those are things completely out of my control. They're really fascinating to research and understand, but I can't physically control it. And I'm not on those councils right now to discuss it. And so I have to put some faith and trust in those, and just control what I can control in my little bubble.
Well, on the topic of controlling what you can control, let's talk about the future of our industry to kind of wrap up today's episode. So, obviously, we've talked a lot about politics and AI, and I think right now those are the two biggest, for lack of a better word, issues that we are facing aside from labor, which we didn't necessarily get into, but obviously there is a labor shortage or struggle right now. People are also worried about, is AI going to take jobs away from us? And we can't even find people to fill jobs. And that's just kind of a ball that maybe we'll not try to tear apart today. But as far as what is really accelerating the industry, and who do you think is positioned to succeed in the future based on these changes that are coming, who is maybe going to be left behind? What are your thoughts on the future of agriculture? Valene, I'm going to call out.
Again, if I had a crystal ball on this, I think I would be a millionaire. And but I think the people that can adapt and make sound decisions are going to be the ones left standing at the end of the day. And we've seen that in the history of agriculture. Um, the ones that have have not adapted have sometimes been left behind, or been or made the decision to not operate anymore. But I think you've the people that are willing to have the hard conversations, the people that are willing to take a risk, are going to be the ones that benefit. Like, what additional cash crops can we put in that might be able to diversify our operation? What technologies can we afford today that will pay us back? Is it the GPS in the tractor? Is it going back and buying a 1999 tractor because you can work on it yourself and not have to send it to um, somebody that's got to plug it into the computer and charge you $200 an hour? It's making those decisions, and it's also being willing to innovate and change. Because we don't know what's to come. We didn't know, like, when I was in high school, I didn't even have a smartphone. I still had a flip phone, and I had 200 texts a month, and now I can get 200 texts a day on my phone, and I'm about ready to chuck it over the bridge. Um, but I think it's being willing to adapt and change, and then we've gotta keep showing up. And I think that's the hardest part, is showing up to these conversations and questioning the norm. Because um in 10 years, we're going to be two administrations past where we're at today, and we'll look back and hopefully laugh at everything that's going on today and say, hey, we survived that too. Just like the Great Depression, or just like, the booms and busts of history. Like, we've got to have the courage and the resilience to ride the waves of whatever comes, good, bad, or indifferent.
I like that point about, obviously, the 1920s. They were a hard time in America. Um, And I'm going to say that the 2020s are also proving to be an interesting time in America. We kicked it off with COVID, and how was that 5 years ago already? And this just kind of seems to maybe it's the decade. I wonder what's going to happen in 3020.
Geez, wow. Well, I have to say, I hope humanity is still here to be doing really cool things, and not go the way of the dinosaurs, even if we would like a meteor strike some days. I I'm in the same boat, I think, and I want to go back to what Val said a little while ago about being fluid, about thinking about what you can control. I think that's such a cool way to put it. Um, Val and I get the feeling, Jesse, that we're all type A, right? And we like to have a plan, we like to have steps. And for me, at least, it's difficult when my plan changes all of a sudden. If I see it coming, it's okay, I can adapt. But if it changes all of a sudden, I tend to get my feathers a little bit ruffled, or a lot of bit ruffled. If you ask my husband, he is a very unruffleable person, which is a really good balance to me because I can ruffle pretty easy. But I think it's looking at the controllables, and also being the kind of producer or entrepreneur, whoever you're talking about, that Val said, of being very forward thinking and being a visionary. And industry consolidation is just a reality. It's not one that I love, because I love agriculture so much, and I love our culture around it, and I love the community around it. But economics and policies and just the realities of where we're at are demanding consolidation, essentially. And so the people who are going to win, the people who are going to be growing and succeeding, are the ones who have that vision. Whether it's buying up distressed properties or operations to grow their own operation, using automation, or AI, or other technological revolutions to make their operations more efficient. Val and I have talked a lot about how you win and succeed as an operation is you're either big or you're special, right? And so you're consolidating and getting bigger, and creating more of those opportunities on scale, or you found a way to become really, really special and unique, and in the way that you operate, the way that you market, the way that you educate, any of those sorts of things. And so it's really dependent on producers and those of us in the industry to make sure that we succeed. And it's not nice to think about people being left behind, but people run the gamut, just like different operations do, right? Some people have a much higher risk tolerance. Some people don't want to put in the work that it's going to take to be able to succeed into the future. And it sounds harsh, but it's just a reality of who and how we are as humans. And
That is evolution. Like that is truly the definition of evolution. Like it's not being callous or, not having feelings. That is evolution.
it is. And the human side of us, you know, gets upset, and, oh, I don't like to think about that, or you're hurting my feelings, or whatever. But we also have to be realists, right? And um, particularly in this day and age, we have to have a really, really clear eyed view of what the opportunities are, what the challenges are, what the risks are, what the threats are, to be able to succeed. And I know that the three of us have intentions of being in agriculture for the rest of our lives and leading our families into the future of agriculture. What is the future of agriculture? I mean, when I was an FFA in ninth grade, I memorized the FFA creed. And the first paragraph is, I believe in the future of agriculture. And I do. And one of the questions that creed speakers get asked is, what is the future of agriculture? There are as many different answers to that as there are agriculturists out there. You can talk about it from a technological perspective. Is it utilizing AI? You can look at it from a human perspective. I don't even know how to look at it from a human perspective, geologic or geographic perspectives, policy perspectives, geopolitical, environmental, sustain, all of the things, right? What is the future of ag? I don't know. But I know that if people like us and forward thinking people in the industry stay engaged, and continue to drive forward with vision and momentum, whatever it is, it's bright. That's my opinion.
I love that. Okay, so if this was Leaders of the West, we end our episodes with a rapid fire round, but this is Millennial Ag. So I'm going to ask you both one rapid fire question before we close out today's episode. What is one thing that agriculture must do now to stay at the forefront of these changes that we've talked about today, whether it is AI, economic, labor, whatever it may be? What is one thing that agriculture must do now to stay at the forefront of these changes? Katharine?
I'm just thinking about it from a personal producer perspective. Producers need to stay engaged with whatever their defining characteristic is. Maybe one producer is super good at marketing, maybe one producer is super good at risk management. Whatever it is, they need to stay engaged, laser focused with whatever their with whatever their unique advantage is. Don't fall on the back foot. Don't forget to read your million emails every day. Stay engaged with the people around you in your community who have that same focus, so that you can use that momentum to maintain momentum into the future.
I don't know if I can match that because that's a really good answer. um, I think being adaptable, and being adaptable and being positive. I can get pretty, you walk in the door at 9 o'clock at night after, treating a calf and feeding, and you've been up since 4:30, and it's easy to get like, well, why is this worth it? And you wake up again and you see the sunrise and go, this is why it's worth it, and so I think being adaptable and positive is my answer.
Oh, those were both fabulous answers. I wouldn't have expected anything less from you two women. Congratulations on 200 episodes. I know that this is only a drop in the bucket compared to what you two are going to continue to produce and achieve, and the kind of conversations that you guys are going to continue to have. I mean, this isn't the type of stuff that everybody is talking about. You guys really are on the forefront of agriculture, thinking about it from a perspective of how to honor our history and our heritage and where we've been, but also not staying stuck in that and continuing to move into the future so that we can continue to have this for our children and our children's children, and to really honor the legacies of those who came before us, but making smart decisions as to how we can keep this so special and stay in that driver's seat so that other people are not driving the future of ag. It is us as agriculturalists, and you guys really are on the forefront of that conversation, and I am so very proud of you guys for all that you have achieved in those types of conversations, because they're not easy, right? I mean, we talked about politics and all of the things that maybe we'd rather not talk about, but you guys kind of put yourselves on the line in order to create conversations that are important, that hopefully inspire other conversations with your listeners, that they may have with other people in the industry or at their dinner table, or perspectives that they may say, I'm going to seek to understand first versus to be understood, because I think that that's something else that is so vital. And I just want to congratulate you guys. And then also thank you for allowing me to host you here today. This has been fabulous. Do you guys have any final parting thoughts before we go on to episode 201?
Oh wow, Jesse, thank you so much for that wrap up, because it's incredible to hear it from someone else's perspective of how far we've come. You were saying all of that, and I really was tearing up a little bit over here, because I think of when Valerie and I started in August of 2019, and everything that has happened after, in between, and everything. There's been babies, there's been moves, there's been job changes, there's been all kinds of life events that have thrown a lot of different things at us. And I am really proud to have been doing this with Valene, and really, really grateful for your friendship and what we've built here. So, Val, without sounding, too full of ourselves, cheers to us. And Jesse, thank you so very much for putting us in the hot seat and moderating this discussion. This has been a really fun way to celebrate a really huge milestone for us.
Yeah, Catherine, you nailed it on the head, and it's been an honor to do it with you and take our walks and chats and actually put it um, behind a mic and talk about things we've really wanted to talk about, going back to our first episode where I think we hit pause and re-record 12 times before we actually got to the point, and there may not have been a bottle of wine involved with that first recording too. Um, but the laughter and the tears and the journey, and it's one thing that Millennial Ag has done is made it we call it our friendship accountability partner. It makes us talk once a week, and talk about things we like to talk about, and peel the cover back on things maybe we don't like to talk about, but it's grown us. And um, I know that if we couldn't have made it to 200 by ourselves, like it's doing it together, and then it's all our listeners, it's our family, it's our husbands, it's our friends that continue to push us. It's people like you, Jessie, that agree to wild ideas and to be guests, and to join us on this journey of 6 years. It's been a whirlwind, but it's been a lot of fun, and I think we've grown a lot in the process. So thank you, Jessie, and we got to plug our listeners too, because without them, we wouldn't have a podcast.
No, not at all. Okay, well, your listeners, they know the drill. You guys are going to be back next week with a brand new episode of Millennial Ag. So until then, stay tuned. Congratulations, you ladies. Cheers to some wild success and for who knows what to come, but we all know it's going to be good. Ladies, thank you very much for having me. To all the listeners, like I said, they will be back next week with a brand new episode of Millennial Ag. So until then, we'll see you later.